Welcome to the Rainmaker Multiplier on Demand, a podcast for leading financial professionals, or rainmakers, and their teams that offer support for securing a successful future. From marketing help to staffing structure, listen and subscribe for actionable insights from advisors and skilled professionals alike.
Hello and welcome everyone to this week's Coffee Break with C2P. We have a topic actually backed by popular demand this week, customizing your email marketing. Thank you to everybody who has sent in topic ideas and feedback for these Coffee Break episodes. Obviously helps us customize everything for what you're looking to hear about and discuss as a group. And of course, don't forget to drop any questions in the chat during our show today. I have a feeling that we might have a lot of questions popping up, which is why we've brought in our star-studded lineup today, including two guests from our valued partner, Snappy Kraken. We'll start with Angel Gonzalez, CMO and co-founder at Snappy Kraken. Angel has built a career in digital marketing, content strategy, and brand development for financial professionals. With experience as a founder of a digital agency and director of marketing for a financial marketing firm, he has helped advisors streamline their marketing efforts through automation and strategic campaigns. We also have Kendall Weil, our partner relationship manager. Many of you obviously met and seen Kendall before with our webinars. But with experience across top broker-dealers, IMOs, FMOs, and custodians, Kendall specializes in lead generation, digital marketing, and community building to enhance visibility and ROI, another popular topic here. And of course, last but certainly not least, our very own Carrie Chadoff, Vice President of Marketing at C2P and head of our in-house marketing agency. Carrie has over 20 years of marketing agency experience, with many of those in the finance industry managing advisors marketing. Thank you all for joining us today. Carrie, we'll get things started with you. From your experience, what are some key components of an effective email marketing strategy for an advisor?
Yeah, it's numerous, but we're going to pick on the top six as identified. An effective email strategy for financial advisors really depend on a few things: personalization, value of the content, using best practices, consistency, compliance, and reporting. So I'm going to touch on each of those very briefly. Certainly our partners at Snappy Kraken have a lot of those solutions and can help us. But personalization and segmentation, gone are the days of one size fits all. You've got to segment your audience based on their financial goals, where they came from. Did they come from a retirement in taxes and retirement? Did they come to you about Social Security, Medicare? So make sure that you're customizing the content to what they've asked about. Use personalization beyond just a name. Take the content to their interest, whether it's retirement planning, wealth preservation, investment strategies. The second thing is value-driven content. You will not get any opens, you will not get any engagement if the value isn't there. And really, it's a test. If I continue to receive an email from a company that I find of no value, what am I going to do eventually? Either I'm going to stop opening it or I'm going to unsubscribe. And so now what we've done is advisors lost any potential contact of nurturing those relationships. Certainly there is the best practices, and we'll get through it, I'm sure, over the next while that we have here, is strong subject lines and call to actions and using best practices. Another element that I talked about is consistency. And consistency really has to go with automation unless you're really disciplined. So there's a lot of platforms out there that you can set up what you want at the beginning of the month, the beginning of the quarter, and let it go. The more you have to touch it, the less you're likely going to do it. Same with monthly investments. If your clients aren't setting a monthly investment, they're probably not going to send you a check every month for investment purposes. We'd be negligent if we didn't talk about compliance and deliverability. That's a big issue, and it will continue to be a big issue, whether it's in our industry or emails in general. So it's really important you're using a proper email platform to distribute your communications. And then if you're doing that, you'll be able to track and optimize. But if you're strictly sending things from your company's Outlook, it makes it very difficult for people to opt out. It makes it very difficult for you to know who opened things and which subject lines, if you're testing, which perform better. So those are some of the things that I would recommend our audience to consider as key components of an email strategy.
Got it. Thank you. Angel, for you, when customizing your email marketing, when advisors doing that, what are some of the components of the emails themselves that the advisors should take into consideration?
So
listen, the most important part is the from address, right? The relationship with who that email is coming from. Because if it's coming from a stranger and you're sending emails to people that you don't know, who don't know, you're really fighting this uphill battle. And there's, some violations there. We don't have to go down the rabbit hole of canned spam or anything, but always think about that. So have that starting point. Where is this relationship? How did I start this relationship? Think about the context of how my audience knows me. So if we start thinking about specific components, I think Carrie hit on a few of these. So we have your subject line, we have your body copy, and then wrapping all of that up is, what is the single message? What are you trying to accomplish? Who is it for? What's it for? And then a call to action. What would you like the person reading that email, the group of people reading that email, what would you like them to do next? And if you're not thinking about that intentionally, if you're not putting any thought into that, you may as well just be creating noise.
Yeah. Have the end in mind before you're creating under that. So, Kendall, how can financial advisors go about testing their email marketing customizations?
Yeah, it's a good question. I like what Carrie said about segmenting your lists, and then what Angel had mentioned about knowing where your prospects are coming from. I think when you consider about how to test the different types of personalization, what we call split testing or A/B testing, there's 3 elements that you can break this down into based on your segmented list. So one of those items could be your subject line. You can test a couple of examples, one that's a bit more formal. You could do something like quarterly financial update for one, or you could do something a bit more creative that's focused more on an interest or a concern. So it would be something like freedom to give back. Your retirement plan starts here. So there's different ways to engage, and that's the first way to get noticed in your prospect's inbox. So this is important. And then the second item could be your email body. So again, going back to the 2 different versions, maybe you try something that is more focused on data and numbers for those prospects that are maybe more analytically focused or factual information. You can talk about the S&P 500 increase or interest rates projected to rise and how that may affect your clients and how they should schedule a review with you. So that's one example of the data. Or you do something more that's focused on storytelling and a case study example. So like a testimonial for your business. That would be something like, Sarah was concerned about how the market shifted, and so we reallocated part of her portfolio. We could do the same for you, just like Sarah, so we should connect soon. And you can see how those land with your different types of segmented lists. And then from there, be able to decide which type of messaging you want to focus on. The third one would be your calls to action. So like what Angel talked about, you don't want to just create noise. You really want to accomplish a goal. And so you'd go back to testing those 2 types of scenarios. One that's something like schedule a call versus learn more about your tax strategies. That's a bit more specific, and you can see if that lands. But the biggest thing is having some type of dashboard that can share all of these analytics with you. And at Snappy Kraken, we have a dashboard that we call the Marketing Hub. We've created this for you so that instead of guessing how these tests really turn out, we can give you all of that information laid out with actionable next steps to take. So that's really critical to determine how your tests are working.
Yeah, thank you for touching on, because I know we talk about that all the time in this community, like in these episodes and some of our marketing roundtables we do of know your numbers, and you have to be tracking everything if you're going to be improving. So to have that built-in dashboard, and I'm glad you hit on the storytelling element too, because we talk about, we've had someone from Story Brand on before. That's what resonates with people. Remember the stories even more than they're going to remember some of the other things that you put in there of the specifics of how you can help. The features and benefits listing, they're going to remember the stories first. Carrie, even leading into that, what can advisors do to help improve the open and engagement rates to make sure that they're getting more eyeballs on their message?
As Kendall and you just talked about, first is knowing your numbers. So often those listening or participating on today's session, if I were to ask you, what are your email open rates and what is your email click-through rates? Ideally, we'd have 100% knowing what those numbers are. So in order to improve something, you have to know what you're currently at. And that, again, is why you really need an email platform. It could be SnappyKraken. There are other platforms out there, but make sure you're using that opposed to simply your Outlook. The only reason you're sending your Outlook is you might get a bounce back, but beyond a bounce back, you don't know who's opening it, you don't know who's clicking, you don't know how much time they're spending on it, other metrics that are available on various dashboards. And also, I want to make sure that when we talk about improving your open rates, make sure you start with a good quality list, because the open rate may be irrelevant if you're sending it to everybody in your hometown, right? But you may only be interested in reaching 10% based on investable assets, but yet who's opening it? I've got a 90% open rate. That's terrific. Unfortunately, that 90% probably should never have been reached in the first place. So really, I would say what are keys to improving your open rate? Knowing what the open rate is and making sure who's opening it are the folks you want opening it. So having said that, we've heard already some great suggestions by Angel and Kendall. Open rates start with a subject line. That is the first thing that comes in, okay, beyond deliverability. So again, let's assume we're dealing with a good quality list. It's who you want to reach, but you need to craft compelling short subject lines, whether that's a question, whether that's a solution, whether that's personalization. John, is your portfolio ready for 2025? Curiosity or urgency, 3 retirement mistakes you can still avoid. Maybe you want to test an A/B. So instead of 3 retirement mistakes you can still avoid, are 3 retirement strategies to improve your long-term plan, right? Really, it's saying the same thing, but test is fear or does trying to position something positively. It's a great A/B test, which is why you need a platform to be able to separate who's received communication A, who received communication B. We talked a little bit about personalization already. Goes back to the value and relevancy. Providing valuable client-focused content. Again, it should not be about you. In fact, most of the email nurturers that we have don't set your expectation that you're going to have a high response rate. Get an expectation that people are looking forward to that. And perhaps when they need you, they're going to reach out to you. Or perhaps when they're in a scenario at a dinner table, somebody's saying, yeah, I'm looking for this. This is my situation. Someone says, I just read a great article by this advisor who continues to send me really valuable content. So think about it as much as a referral opposed to the immediacy. And it really goes back to what are you setting your proper expectations. I would also say improving open rates also have to do with timing and frequency. So do not send an email to a new prospects every day for the next 30 days. What's going to happen is they're going to stop opening it or they're going to opt out. Generally, I recommend perhaps once a week, once a month, at a minimum, once every other month. Again, set a cadence and follow that. And the final thing that I'll touch on in terms of open rates is we've talked about testing different messages, and we've talked about testing different subject lines, but I also test about when should you send it. So do Tuesdays work better than Thursdays or Saturday, right? And most of us are going after individual consumers at their home opposed to businesses, but there are certainly business owners. So think about when would a business owner be more likely to open an email? Is it on a Sunday morning or a Monday night? I can't answer that with any certainty, but it's certainly an easy test to set half of your audience to receive an email on said time and the other half on another time. Test it multiple times. So what works for somebody may not work for you. Markets are different. Your audiences are different, but test that. And that often will lead to higher open rates.
Got it. Thank you, Kerry. So Angel, I think this is a sweet spot question for you. What are some of the ways advisors can be leveraging drip campaigns and automation to both nurture leads, but also deepen client relationships?
Yeah, that's fantastic. So before I even lead into that, I do want to call out something, Kerry. There was a resounding theme within a lot of the stuff you were saying, and it was expectations. And oftentimes I've worked with advisors where they're sending out emails and they want to close a potential client with one email. Don't we all? Don't we all wish we could just hit a button and make money time and again? But here's the thing, expectations. Your timeline for business and the needs that potential client has, their timeline may be a little bit different than yours. And that's what we're getting at here is really resetting those expectations and making sure that you have a system and a process that you're running. That way you don't have to scramble. You don't have to cross your fingers and do all these marketing efforts that aren't really tied to a strategy. Get that system in place. And then that way your timeline and their timeline will converge at some point. Now, before I even talk about the drip campaigns, I had an advisor that was wondering that, hey, I'm sending out emails. I have all these people on my list. I see this one person. I'd love to have them as a client. She keeps opening my emails, but I'm not getting any replies. She was on the list for 2 years, 2 years as a prospect. Around the 2-year mark, she replied and said, hey, something's gone on. I'm getting ready to retire. I've been getting your emails. I visit your website. I'd love to have a conversation. So look at how that pays off and how there is a little bit of a difference between what my timeline would be, instant right now, and what that potential client's timeline is, what their reality is. Make sure that you don't confuse the two. So thinking about drip campaigns and automated campaigns, I want to reduce those two down to a simple word, just the basic building block of what drip and automation is. It's conversations. We're talking about emails right now. Email is just a vehicle. It's just a channel for a conversation that leads to a meaningful relationship. And in the context that we're talking here, a meaningful relationship that drives business. So when you're thinking about drip campaigns, automation, think conversations. And every conversation is going to be different. It's going to have its own objective. It's going to have its own theme. You're speaking to a prospect or you're speaking to a client. Those conversations look a lot different. So yeah, the linchpin here is a conversation. And if you're going to get at the highest level, the most basic level, don't just have one list where you're emailing everybody the same thing. Because guess what? You have a mix of prospects. You have a mix of clients. Those are different conversations. So you don't want to solicit a current client. They're going to feel like you don't really value the relationship. So at the bare minimum, prospects and clients. Now, everybody here, you might have a different process for how you segment. Carrie and Kendall, you might have a difference of opinions on how you would handle this, but it is going to be different on a per firm basis, whether you focus on different niches or you focus on different life stages, whether it's high earners, pre-retirees, or retirees. I'll leave you with this. So just think about the life stage. Try not to overcomplicate this. I've seen some people get way too nuanced. Some advisors that might as well have a segment that says, guys with beards, clean-shaven guys. You don't have to get that nuanced. I'm assuming your list is not 22 million people. So you can be reasonable. You don't have to run yourself ragged trying to get way too nuanced, but the bare minimum, think of those main two groups and then think about your own processes, your own service offering. Who do you work best with? What is your audience made up of? And start thinking along those lines of the niches, life stages. That way you don't send someone an email about setting themselves up for a comfortable retirement in 45 years or 30 years. And then that recipient happens to be 92 years old. Talk about timelines, right? That's a little bit of a mismatch in a timeline.
Right. No, I appreciate you addressing that. And I'll share a story from JL Smith, our practice level side. Angel, it was similar to yours. We, on the prospect side, we will divide ours up by topic, by niche area. And we had sent one, this was probably a couple months ago. We have an advisor that really focuses on working with federal employees and had an email that went out and a woman responded and said, hey, I met with you about 18 months ago, had one meeting. I wasn't ready to move forward at that time. Thank you for continuing to send this stuff. Got back on his calendar and they're going through the process now for us, a diamond level client. That opportunity came up just by sending relevant content. We didn't just send the same thing to all prospects. It was tailored to her needs and got her back on the calendar there.
I love one of my favorite analogies is thinking about it like a movie theater popcorn. Not every kernel pops at the same time, but if you have a system, if you're applying that heat, relevant messaging to those kernels, they will all pop at different times. But if you have that process, then you're not going to go hungry. You're going to have snacks going forward. That's what I'm trying to say here.
And we all love popcorn.
But having said that, Angel, let's not put too much pressure on individuals because you'll burn them.
But I love it.
You were sitting on that one, Carrie. So Kendall, I'll bring it back to you because I think it's a good segue from that one. You started to hit on this earlier, talking about your dashboards, but what metrics are the most common to track to deem the success of an email campaign or campaigns?
Yeah. Before I get into the metrics, I wanted to harp on a couple of things that Angel and Carrie both talked about. I think we touched on frequency, and Angel talked about that 2-year kind of chase towards the right type of client. And I think it's about setting the right expectations for ourselves. And there was always this quote, I think Matt Halloran from Proudmouth had mentioned, I think you guys may work with him too, but it's think about this as an investment towards the right types of clients. And it's not about timing your marketing necessarily, but more so time in marketing. Having that length is important. And I think especially even for tracking the different types of metrics, we can get a little caught up in those shiny, like sexy metrics that we first come to table with, like what are our open rates and click-through rates. And though those do serve a really good purpose, I think like the open rate is something we can consider that obviously shows the effectiveness and how well your audience recognizes your brand. And that's probably what works best for that client that comes out of the emails after 2 years. And high open rates can be deceiving if they don't lead to further engagement. So I do want to focus on the actual outcomes that drive real business growth, not just those vanity metrics. But on the contrary, if you have low open rates, that's a good indicator that your messaging isn't quite right. From the data that we've collected at Snappy Kraken, there's a few different elements that increase open rates. And Carrie talked about this a little bit. And I just want to emphasize what we have found is that having an optimistic tone and really having something positive to say in a subject line will help you get noticed far more than the average email. We're under so much pressure right now. Most of your clients and prospects are worried, they're uncertain, and they want to hear from their credible source, which is you, something positive. So I think that's something to definitely include. And then the timely and relevant topics, things that are in the headlines, tax opportunities, those are coming up. Those seemingly work really well. So open rates are important, but we also want to move them through the process. So opening the email is one, clicking through the email and taking the next step is the second. When you have high click-through rates, then your content is more compelling, and they're hopefully either scheduling the meeting that was offered or reading the article or downloading the PDF. So those are more goal-driven. So you have to have emails that have that type of goal in mind and give them actionable next steps to take. And then your click-through rate is your first signal that the prospect is interested and open to more engagement. So on our marketing hub, we also have something called the opportunity queue. This basically surfaces and triggers all of your top opportunities, people who have engaged with your content, read into a couple of your things, and then can let you know who's ready to take the next step. So it's that one-to-one action that you can start to play with and then hopefully start more conversations. Because when I talk to broker dealers who are looking to recruit more advisors, or I'm talking to advisors looking to recruit high net worth individuals or agents trying to grow their business, the common denominator is that if they can get in front of more potential clients, they can have more conversations, and there's a good chance they can land them as clients. So we trust that your sales process is strong. That's why you work with C2P. I know that they offer you a ton of resources to do that successfully. So conversation starting is really critical to be able to measure as well. And then the last thing I want to touch on is this hidden metric that can be challenging to measure because it's almost like this silent metric. And I think that's the client retention aspect. So it comes in different forms. I'm at a conference right now. Someone came up to us and said that by using these types of emails from Snappy Kraken, they have heard such positive feedback from their clients, positioning them as experts, and just getting to know them more frequently simply by emailing them on a regular basis about educational topics. So that's one. And then The silent killer is that your phones aren't ringing off the hook. So it's this proactive approach to communication instead of the frantic phone calls about what's going on in the markets, tapping with increased rates, things like that. So those would be my 4 topic metrics to measure open rates, click-throughs, conversations, and then maybe lack of frantic phone calls.
No, that's great. And I like that you mentioned what's the end result too, because Angel said earlier, like email's one avenue, it's one channel, and especially as you can layer these results on with others. We'd all love the one event close of how to get someone into and through your funnel, but that's not the reality. So how does what you're doing from a webinar or an in-person event, your email, your phone call campaign, how does that all tie together? So the more you can track and aggregate those numbers, like you're saying, Kendall. So we only have a few minutes left. I do want to go maybe around the horn. Angel, maybe we can start with you. Any new and effective ways to grow our email lists?
So I remember being 3 years old and I look up at my mother and I'm like, Mama, where do email contacts come from? And that's when I knew it was going to be a marketer. No, just kidding. So let's think about this. Let's deconstruct this. So email list, it's not going to self-perpetuate and grow itself. Sometimes it can through people sharing, forwarding emails, and you getting replies that way. But I would say rather than seeking any shiny new tools, shining new channels, and feel free to jump in here, Carrie, Kendall, Matt, tell me if you disagree, but rather than seeking any shiny new tools, let's make sure that we're getting some of the fundamentals right. Our website, if we're driving traffic to our website, if we're coming up in search engines and they're landing on our website, do we have the proper opt-in forms, the proper calls to action, the proper headlines that are compelling, that are focused on the audience that we seek to serve? Are those on our website, driving potential visitors, potential clients to email us and ask a question? Are we doing anything proactive? Are we going on LinkedIn and doing searches for key job titles? Maybe it's key employers that we work well with. And are we doing some proactive research and guiding that conversation along the way? Are we collecting emails at any events we might be hosting? So I'll say when I ask these questions, oftentimes advisors uncover this whole other gold mine of potential sources that they could be mining for those additional contacts so they can add them to their email list and keep driving those meaningful relationships.
And I think you mentioned a lot of great ideas. Website, think about SEO and how effective are you producing leads on your website. Any live educational events, maybe you did a FIA, all of your prospects, anyone that's touched you, anyone that's downloaded a guide from your website, any Facebook ads you may have ran to recruit people for a webinar or offering a free chapter of a book. All those individuals absolutely need to go into your nurture campaigns. And don't forget about your existing clients. That first and foremost, make sure you're talking to them because they're probably your highest referral source. So lots of ways, and bet all of you already have lots of individuals you can add to your email list.
Great. Thank you all very much. We hit our time there. Lots of good information. Angel, Kendall, thank you very much for joining us today. For any of you, if you want more information on SnappyCracken, obviously you can go to their website, snappycracken.com. You can also find their information on our partner portal page on C2P Central, or obviously you can come right to me and Carrie and ask us questions for the connection there. But Carrie, Kendall, Angel, thank all 3 of you for joining us today. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Thanks for tuning in. This podcast was brought to you by C2P, an organization whose purpose is to educate, train, grow, and support holistic financial advisors so families can achieve true prosperity. Never miss an episode by subscribing now to discover new resources and strategies. Visit c2penterprises.com to learn how we can help scale and secure your business. At the time of delivery and any subsequent publishing, information was deemed reliable, but is subject to change by the time of listening or viewing. The contents of this piece include options and projections of C2P, are subject to change, and are for informational purposes only. The information provided in this presentation is not intended to be individual investment, tax, or legal advice.